Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inclusion 101 for Administrators. This session is called Getting a Lay of the Land, School and District Inclusive Philosophies. I'm Kerry Cormier,
And I'm Johari, Sykes-Ratliff.
and we would like to welcome you to this video series. This session is brought to you by the Learning Resource Center Network, which is a NJDOE Office of Special Education project. The Learning Resource Center Network offers educators, leaders, and families support, services, and professional development. This slide shows the locations and contact information for our 4 centers across the state. And today's session is brought to you by the LRC-South, located in James Hall at Rowan University. Our agenda for this video is to first reflect on district perspectives, next to define inclusion, and then to situate ourselves at the table when it comes to inclusive education. Our norms at the LRC-South is that we use strengths-based language and demonstrate a growth mindset. We engage in solution-oriented discussions with open minds. We reflect on what is shared and seek clarification or support when needed. And we stay focused on the topic, actively listen to one another, and ensure all voices are heard. The goals and objectives of this video is that administrators and educators will be able to reflect upon their district's inclusive philosophy and identify actions to take to create more inclusive spaces.
So let's get started. This is the next part in our inclusion series. So if you haven't had the opportunity to view the previous ones, please feel free to do so. This specifically is going to focus on our administrators, which Kerry already mentioned. So the first starting point is going to be exploring what your philosophy is in terms of the implementation of inclusion. So what we would like for you to do now is take a minute, pause the video if you need to. I wish I had some background music playing you could listen to. But either way, just pause and review your district's mission, vision, and or the purpose statements. And just really think about, are we truly incorporating inclusion at the district level? And then if you'd like, you can even think about at the school level. Okay, welcome back. So, in your view, as far as inclusion is concerned, here's the main question. Is your district inclusive? Or if you want to take it down to a micro level, is my school inclusive? How does the district define inclusion? And then do your statements mention inclusion? Now let's look at the students. Who's mentioned in the mission, vision, and or purpose statements? Does the district broadly discuss the student body? Do they specifically call out any specific groups of children? Next are the goals. What's the focus? What is the goal of the district's vision? Assuming that your school's mission and vision are aligned, then what are the aims? Are they connected to inclusion? And then lastly, but of high importance, is equity. Who benefits? So after reviewing the mission and the vision, does it apply to all students equitably? Are some students left out? Depending on your answers, there's always room for growth and improvement. And so you may say, we have a strong vision, we have a strong mission. We do call out specific students, or there are some kids that are not specifically called out in our vision, our mission statement, or our goals aren't aligned to inclusion. Well, the first thing we need to do then is define inclusion. And there's 3 different ways to look at this. We can look at it through federal guidance, which is the law, research, and self-advocates. So according to the law, we look at these 4 elements. Let's start at separate facility. This is when children with disabilities spend their day at a separate school or in a residential setting. There is limited to no interaction with neurotypical children as far as schooling is concerned. The segregated setting is when children with disabilities spend less than 40% of their day in the general education classroom. Push out, push in, pull out. This is when students with disabilities spend 40 to 79% of their day in the general education classroom. Now, inclusion, this is the goal. This is when children with disabilities spend 80% or more of their day in the general education setting.
And I think it's important to remember when we're talking about each of these settings,
Mm-hmm.
again, according to the law, the, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it
Mm-hmm.
defines special education as a service. It is not a place.
Yes,
So these are placements that we are creating. But again, the law defines special education as a service, not as a place.
correct. So in reference to research, inclusive education pertains to all learners, not just the children with disabilities. It ensures that all learners' experiences are inclusive and participatory rather than exclusionary and marginalizing, and goes just beyond the physical location of learning. Inclusive education is concerned with democracy and social justice by looking at cultural practices of schools, and it goes beyond ticking a box for settings. So that I think that connects
Mhm.
specifically to what you just said, Kerry.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, in my experience, we say inclusion, and you directly think about the children with disabilities, but it goes beyond that. How
Mhm.
are we supporting all learners? Children with disabilities need to be integrated into the classroom setting and least restrictive environment, everything that is, identifying the IEP, the services, all. But we also need to be considering how are we differentiating in the classroom? Are we providing flexible seating if a child needs modified scissors? So it spans
Mhm.
beyond just,
And
this is
it's
something that relates to all children.
thinking of also our multilingual learners,
Yes.
gifted students,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, it's all students, right? All means all. So we're thinking about all of our students' needs in conjunction together. And again, going just beyond this idea of physical location, um,
Mhm.
and thinking beyond just special education.
Mhm. Exactly. So then when we look at disability rights advocates, here's a definition that I think we both absolutely love.
Yep.
Inclusive education is the valuing of diversity within the human community. Every person has a contribution to offer the world. When inclusive education is fully embraced, we abandon the idea that children have to become normal in order to contribute to the world. Instead, we search for and nourish the gifts that are inherent in all people. This is the core of what we do, or what we should be doing. Fully embracing, knowing we don't have to change someone, but recognize their contribution,
Mhm.
nourish the gifts that they have. And so you as an administrator are in the role where you set the tone, and you have so much to bring to the table in helping to create this space where we are inclusive for all children.
And I think in the work that Johari and I do, working with, um, people who are becoming educators or are already educators, like every teacher, every educator is going to come forward with this philosophy, right? I think it's who we are, right? Anybody who is in this field is in this field because we believe that
Mhm.
everybody has a gift and the potential to do something great and offer the world, like they're saying in this definition. Um, so I think it speaks to the heart of who we are as educators, inclusive or not, like it is what we do.
That's right.
And so we think about the tenets of inclusive education. And, even just calling our education inclusive, like that's something that we should strive for just inherently. It should just be education, right, for all individuals. And so starting at the top and going clockwise, we start with presuming competence, which goes back to Norman Kuntz's quote on the previous slide, is that we believe that every child, every student has something to offer. We believe at the start that everybody is capable. So presuming competence means removing any sort of biases that we have about a person's abilities. Um, and so we presume competence and we utilize universal design for learning and differentiated instruction so that we make the curriculum and our spaces accessible for all students. Then we're going to strive for natural proportions in our neighborhood schools. Again, you think about who gets sent where. Like I want all of my children to go to their neighborhood schools, right? Like I don't want my son to go to one school and then my daughter, because perhaps she has a particular label, to be sent across town, right? I want that sense of community. I want my children to go to school together. And so we respect that with families, right? That's your neighborhood school, so that's where you should be going. And so that really means taking a look at some of our programs that are only housed in particular schools. And we want to move away from that, right? So that children and families can go to their neighborhood school. And again, striving for natural proportions. So if individuals with disabilities are 10% of the population, then we want them to be 10% of the classroom. And so being mindful of that. Then we want to, again, understand special education is a service. It is not a place. The child does not follow the teacher. The teachers and the specialists follow the child. We also want to remember this idea of co-planning, co-teaching, and collaboration. Nothing we do is done in isolation. It is done together as a team, right? And it is a team approach to support all children. And then finally, and really what's at the heart of it is we want this sense of community, right? Who belongs in our community? Is our community inclusive? Is everybody included in our community? Or are we exclusionary, right? Again, if we have students being sent to separate areas, that shows that they don't belong, right? Because otherwise they'd be included. So again, really focusing on our community, who is invited in, who belongs here, who is accepted and appreciated and embraced in our groups, and really making sure that our groups are heterogeneous, right? That it's not just one particular population of students. Everybody is involved.
Mhm.
And so here's the hard part is situating ourselves at the table. And so this data is from the 2023 IDEA data presented to the United States Congress. Sadly, New Jersey is the lowest when it comes to inclusive education. We are number 50. We are the only state, you can see it's highlighted there in yellow towards the bottom of the slide. We're the only state with less than 50% of our students with disabilities being fully included throughout the day. We're
Wow.
at 4.2% in 2023. The next one is New Mexico at 52.4%. And so you can kind of, again, the graphic is a little small, but you can look this up. It is the report that is sent to Congress annually. And so you'll see states like Alabama at the top is 83.8% of their students are fully included 80% or more of the day. Um, you can look at Pennsylvania is 61.8% fully included during the day. And so you'll see this wide range. But again, New Jersey is the only state, sadly, that has less than half of our population of students with disability labels being fully included. So we have some work to do. And so I think that's something to take away is that this is a statewide thing. You are not at this alone. It's something for all of us collectively throughout New Jersey to be working on.
Mhm. So just real quick, Kerry, as a just a quick discussion point, why is this the case? I mean, I'm sure there's several reasons, but is there anything that stands out to you as a reason why we have not made the strides that I guess
Mhm.
in my mind I thought it did to some degree, you know?
Right? It is something that, like, when we share this data with teachers and administrators, everybody's kind of like, oh my God, what? Um,
Mhm.
it's startling, right? To know that you're in last place. Um, it is very startling. You look at factors like people often cite the US News and World Report, where we're number one in education or number two. We always go back and forth, right, between the first and second spots. A lot of that data, though, incorporates test scores. And if our students with disabilities are not being counted in those test scores or they're not being counted in college admissions, that data does not factor in inclusion, which
Mhm.
is very problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something. Some people were asked, well, maybe we just have a higher population. We don't. It's proportional. When you again like look in these reports and you look at the data, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like Alabama has less students, less autistic students, or they have less students, with specific learning disabilities. It's not the case. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is just how our districts are set up. New Jersey is unique in that we have over 500 school districts in the state. For one of the tiniest states, we will have probably the most or the greatest amount of school districts. A lot of other states run their districts countywide. So that allows them to really kind of um, utilize their resources in different ways. And so that goes into it. But again, like I had said on one of the other slides, is that New Jersey, and I don't think that we're unique in this, but it is problematic where we'll have a district where one particular elementary school is where our autism program is housed.
Yeah.
Another elementary school is where our emotional
Mm-hmm.
program is housed. And
Mm-hmm.
that is not how education is meant to be designed under the IDEA. And so there is a report to Congress from several years ago that calls out New Jersey for that practice. And so that's something really that we need to think about. And is that best practice? And
Mm-hmm.
the answer is no.
No. Yeah, I think it's important, and I'm just wanted to dig into this a little bit more because oftentimes we get data sets and we just look at it for what it is, but it's important to take this back, maybe do a comparison with your district and look at your percentages and really try to figure out the why, and then now what's the solution. So
Hmm.
we know that we want to be inclusive, we want to be supportive for all children. So what can we do within the scope of what we're able to do here in our district, in our school, to make some changes, right? Even if it's small at first, but having long-term goals. That's something we talked about in one of our earlier sessions. Things don't happen overnight, but it's important to have, we make baby steps, we make small
Hmm.
goals and larger long-term goals. But really get into this data and figure out what to do with it. And then also, you said an important piece about what group is left out of data that we see that looks so good.
Hmm.
Number one and number two at the state level, but are we factoring in children with disabilities? It goes back to our first slide about looking at the vision, purpose statement. Is there a group of students that are left out? Are we too broad in defining students, right?
Hmm.
So you really got to look into the data to see what it's really telling you. So yeah, thanks for that, Kerry.
Yeah, of course. And so moving ourselves forward, and so what Johari was saying, um, it's it is a collective group effort, but a lot of it comes down to our administrators. No pressure.
Mhm.
Um, So we have this fabulous quote here from Costin Theo Harrison Villa. It is the principal who will ultimately make or break a school's ability to be inclusive and to transcend from the rhetoric of inclusion to the reality of embracing the full range of students with and without disabilities as members of the general education, learning, and social community. And again, that social community piece, like we have to think, it's so easy as educators, to just close our doors, and like just focus on what's going on in our room, but thinking what goes on outside of our room. What's the lasting impact? When the students leave our classrooms in June, where are they going? What are they doing? What's the next year going to be? And the next year, and the next year. And really thinking about how are we setting them up for life and thinking about how we can kind of set up society as we'd like it to be. So how do we do that? Right? If a lot of it, is weighing on the administrator's shoulders, we need to think about how, as district and building administrators, we determine school schedules and physical layouts. Does our schedule allow for collaboration and co-teaching and co-planning? As a former special education teacher, like I didn't have co-planning time, and that was, a real barrier for me in being my best self as a co-teacher with my partner. So really looking at our schedules, looking at the physical layout, like where are students going? If students are getting pulled out of the room, do they have to travel all the way to the other side of the building? Can we bring classes closer together to physically foster more inclusive transitions? As district and building administrators, we also oversee the placement of students in classrooms. So if we're thinking of natural proportions, are we being mindful, like, is one room the quote unquote inclusive room, right? And if we think that's the inclusive room, well, then that means the other classroom, well, what's that? The exclusive room? Like, we don't want to send that message. It's a very subtle message, but it still says something. And so are we being mindful of how many students with services are in a particular setting? We also set the tone and the climate of our school communities. If we're having an assembly, are we considering the needs of our students who might have some uh, sensory processing support, right? Are we being mindful? Like, do we have headphones? Do we have students who are using AAC devices to communicate? And can we get a communication board out on the playground so that students can be on the playground and still find ways to communicate with each other? Do we encourage learning about inclusive pedagogies? So thinking about all of the PD that you bring in, and all of the fabulous learning that's happening, is it tailored towards helping us become more inclusive educators? And then are we supporting and fostering opportunities for collaboration? Are we inviting teachers? They are experts, right? There are in-house experts. Are we inviting them to collaborate with each other to improve their practice? And so just some food for thought questions. As district administrators, how do we empower our building administrators, so our principals, our coaches, our child study team members, to move toward inclusive practices? Are we setting up space for our building administrators to, move the needle on inclusion? And then as building administrators, how do we empower and support our teachers in enacting inclusive practices in their classrooms every day? Are we helping them find strategies? Are we helping them brainstorm and problem solve for situations that are coming up from a strengths-based perspective? And so, again, just thinking about what tone are we setting as administrators? Knowing that we are the leaders in the schools, what type of leadership and what's the message of our leadership related to inclusive education? So our key takeaways from this video is that first, school and district mission statements can set the tone for fostering inclusive practices. And so making sure that it is called out in a strengths-based way in our mission statements. Second, there are varying definitions of inclusion, and it's important to analyze how our district and school mission statements align with them. What is our idea of inclusion, and what's our own definition for it, and how are we conceptualizing it? And then finally, district and building administrators play a critical role in making inclusion of all students possible. So again, thinking about our leadership and how our leadership can help us take inclusion and move it forward. So we thank you for participating. We have many resources at the Learning Resource Center to help you in your mission to learn about inclusive education. We share our references here for you for your further learning and education around inclusive education. We invite you to connect with the LRC-South on our various social media accounts. And finally, we encourage you to follow the New Jersey Department of Ed on their various social media accounts as well. And we thank you for engaging with us in this video.